So thanks a lot for coming to the Metropolis Lab and to see this collaboration that we're talking about through sustainability. And this is a story maybe about HOK and Shaw contract, but this is a story about how we need to collaborate collectively to all reach our goals individually. So my name's Tim Conway. I manage the sustainability initiatives for the commercial divisions at Shaw. And it's my role to try to translate what we do as a manufacturer to help our customers achieve their goals. Whether it's the goal of the company you work for, maybe it's the project you're working on, or what I really hope, maybe your personal values. And how do we take those into our professional lives? So I'll hand it off to our HOK team.
I'm Max Driscoll. I'm the Sustainable Design Leader at HOK for the Northeast practice. We work with Shaw on a regular basis, and I helped lead with Christine a firm-wide interiors sustainability redesign over the last couple of years, and we'll talk a bit about that going forward.
Yeah, and I'm Christine Vandover. I'm an interior design principal at HOK in New York, and I work on both corporate and healthcare projects. So I'm always really interested about health and well-being and doing a lot of research on materials. So that's why I really reached out to Max, and we wanted to get this initiative going. So we want to just share with you a little bit about the initiative that we've been doing at HOK over this last year. And then we'll talk a little bit about circularity and the idea of a new phase in your design projects that you can incorporate. And then we'll talk about Shaw's circularity approach too.
So this was in the middle of COVID. It was sort of this time to reflect for us, especially among the different disciplines within HOK. And I think we came out of that thinking, okay, well, we need to double down on sustainability. We've been leaders in that field for a long time, but a lot of the field has caught up to us. And so we had this thought, well, we need to double down on that. We need to, breathe new life into this. And so what does that mean for the firm and the interiors practice specifically? And so in my practice over 20 years, I've found that the hardest thing for uptake on sustainability is the complexity of it. And so what we tried to do is distill it down into these three basic components: human health, climate change, and social equity. And clearly the moment was about more than just carbon, right? There was the human health component of COVID and the social justice movement. So it was like an opportunity to kind of wrap that all up into one simplified framework.
So this was the commitment that we made to all our interior designers, and this initiative was across all of our offices, but it was really to put more of a focus on the materials, because with LEED and WELL, often you're only focusing on about 20 materials, and we realized our projects can have a much bigger impact. So we wanted to address all three of those points that Max was just talking about. And then this is an article that we saw in Metropolis magazine, and I don't know if you all have read it, but if you haven't, this is a really good one to look up. It's from December of 2020, and it really kind of emphasized that impact that interiors has. So, we've always focused on buildings because everyone's like, oh, the building has the biggest impact on waste and carbon and everything, but a designer at LMN actually did research and looked at her space and started looking at the materials and how often the space was renovated over 7 or 8 years, and that it's almost equal to the impact of a building. And so I think that's where we all, as interior designers and manufacturers, can, we have a big impact on what we're doing every day.
Yeah, I would say that was really an aha moment for us internally. Yeah. This article, because we were talking about embodied carbon, that being sort of the next frontier on the, sustainability push with carbon. And if you look at the initial impact of embodied carbon on a project, it's like the structure is 45%, the envelope is 30%, interiors is like 5%, But this article just kind of triggered something in all of us to realize, okay, but that's one time, not for the 75 or 100-year life of the building. And in aggregate, it actually flips. The interior design, given the amount of times you turn that space over the life cycle of the building, has a bigger embodied carbon footprint impact than the structure and the envelope. And so that was a really important sort of discovery for us.
So we have a little poll here. If you want to log in on your phone, there's a little poll here that you can answer. It's right at the bottom here. But we're wondering, how many finished materials and products do you typically specify on an interiors project?
How many total finishes are we specifying on every single project? 95.
Yeah, you can shout it out.
Yeah. We could turn this into like an auction.
Yeah. So I know well, we can. So I actually, a few years ago, I actually took a spec book from a couple different projects and I counted them. And so for a smaller corporate project, it was like 150. And for healthcare, it's about 350. So, I did it for selfish reasons. I did it for reasons to show, like, our job is really important. We have a lot of research to do. We're coordinating 350 materials. But when you think about it from a sustainability point of view, it's a lot. And so all those things add up. It seems like a small choice, but it's big. So we're looking at, we talk to our designers about, we always want to look at, beautiful products and things that are durable, because that's very important to the function, but we want to look at sustainability equally. So it needs to be all three of these. Plus, now we're adding reused. And I think this is really where interior design is going to change quickly, probably over the next few years, is around circularity and reuse of materials, even more than it has been.
So this is the framework we came up with, and Christine alluded to it earlier. With LEED, you're tracking 20 products for EPDs or health product declarations. But what we wanted to do is capture all of our projects, firm-wide, across the interiors practice. So, if we're being honest with ourselves, maybe 25% of our projects pursue a certification. We have specs that are tight and everything, but what we wanted to do is make sure 100% of our projects are getting the same level of attention in terms of material screening for embodied carbon, green chemistry, and sustainable sourcing. And so this was a value add to all of our clients, just to say, whether you're pursuing certification or not, we're going to provide this service to you, this level of professionalism. So, in getting back to that simplicity, we made sure that, it took us a long time to get here.
Yeah, it looks really simple, but this took about 4 months
windy
or
road.
so. Yeah.
And we also understood that our audience, the designers, aren't the sustainability professionals that are dealing with this every day. So we had to try to really work really hard to make it simple and digestible for them. And so now we're thinking about a fourth component here, circularity on the right. And so I guess just to touch on embodied carbon is we're looking at the global warming potential of each product in the finished schedule. Green chemistry, we're looking at the material ingredients. Does it have a certification like Cradle to Cradle, Declare? We're also looking at VOCs in that category. And then for sustainable sourcing, we're looking at recycled content. Does the material have recycled content, yes or no? And then for wood, is it FSC certified? So it's a pretty distilled series of questions, and that was intentional.
So for this question, if you want to log into the poll again, or you can just shout it out too, but we were wondering, are you tracking any of these things on your projects right now? When Max and I were starting to get into this, we reached out to a couple different firms and our networks, and we found that actually very few firms are actually tracking these. Everyone set goals for these and we're going to do this by 2030 and we're going to do this, but they're not actually tracking it. And so for us, we felt to make this initiative have impact that we needed to take 2021 and use it as our beta year, look at the numbers, and we learned this from the manufacturers because you all do it all the time. And I think as interior designers, we don't always do that, but you're always looking at how to improve the efficiency of something, and you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at the costs and the sustainable aspects. So we wanted to have that data and then keep raising the bar as we go forward.
Yeah, that was a subtle point, but it was a really important one. Like all of our peers at other big three-lettered firms, they were advocates, they were pursuing it, or there was a special project that got extra special attention. But what we wanted to do, like I said, is get it, tracked on all projects. And it's a level of rigor that we didn't find in the market. And it's a nuance, but I think it's an important, demonstration of the commitment that HOK is putting forward. And I was surprised at how little pushback I got when I put that forward. So that was encouraging that people were game. This is another piece of the rollout of the strategy, and not to just keep it between Christine and I in the New York office. We have I think 25 plus offices throughout the country. And so we're crowdsourcing the implementation of this. We're doing a couple things where we're crowdsourcing it to each office, assigning a sustainability liaison. We're also upskilling some of those enthusiastic young designers who are interested and want to be advocates. And also, it's a better implementation plan because they know what's happening in their studios, much faster than what we know that's happening in their studios, which was key if we wanted to get all of the projects going through this screening process.
Yeah, and they could also help the designers in their studio with little questions and things like that, and kind of be a resource for them. Yeah, so this has worked out really well. We meet once a month and we kind of share tips. And then we also shared a presentation with a lot of different manufacturers. So we actually set up virtual calls with them, and that's how we got connected with Tim. And we kind of went through like, hey, we wanted to share with you what our initiative was. And it was funny because a lot of manufacturers were like, wait, what do we have to present to you? We're like, no, you don't have to present anything. We're presenting to you, and we want to share with you what we're doing and what we're looking for and what our interior designers are going to be asking you. And so we met with the sales, local sales rep, but then we also met with the VPs of sustainability at the firms, and then we started adding the marketing team as well. So it was really interesting. We started actually getting requests for meetings from different companies. Like one company would tell another rep, like, hey, you need to meet with HOK. But it was really great, and I think the reps especially really appreciated this simple framework because it helped them to just kind of understand all these millions of certifications and really, how they're organized. Yeah.
So coming at this from a manufacturer standpoint, I'm fortunate, my team, Shaw Contract's fortunate to work with design leaders all over the world. We all have goals, right? But the accountability and the compliance is tough, right? It's hard to measure how good we're doing if we're making 150 different choices on every project we specify. What is the impact of one of those choices, 10 of those choices, let alone 150? So I love the accountability that HOK put in place because it drives collaboration. And so many times as a manufacturer, I hope you take this the right way, sometimes it feels like things are happening to us, not with us, right? This approach between HOK is a situation where we felt like things were happening with us. We were part of this solution. We were part of the 150 products and wanted to be transparent to collaborate on the impacts that we share. So we liken it to, this was kind of a reverse lunch and learn, right? I showed up with this, I had a deck prepared. I didn't know what I was getting into, right? But all of a sudden it became about collaborating. So how often do we do this in practice? Like we're good at product presentations, I think so. But what does a best practice presentation look like? I've been doing this for a long time. I've been in this industry for 25 years. When did it become mandatory that you had to have a CEU to do a lunch? When did you leave a CEU and say, wow, I am ready to go? Right? This is exactly what I was looking for. And I'm not saying, I know we need to do it. But what would it look like on a presentation maybe if you gave us a presentation for 10 minutes, we gave you a presentation for 20 minutes, and then we started to talk about how we wanted to change the way we work together? Right? The design liaisons that you have at HOK are now engaged with my local team, and we're making progress. So we can't change the way the impacts we do together until we change the way we communicate. So here's where I think we're at today. Maybe, give me a nod if you think we're really good at talking about these are our standards. These are our product standards, right? I don't think we should change that, but why does it seem like our product standards and our human standards are either in conflict with one another, or it may be an either or a but? Right, here's what it sounds like today. It's like, hey, what does it look like? What does it cost? Does it fit my budget? Maintenance, ease of installation, speed to market? We are really good at that. But what do we say about what impacts do these choices have on climate change, health and well-being, circular economy? How do we make those conversations so they're not an either or, but just good design? So at Shaw, it's like, we have people together, Planet Forever. That's who we are. The most important part of that title is the word together. Because with an unlimited budget and unlimited resource, my company can't solve climate change. Christine, you can't solve circular economy by yourself, but it's how we have to change the way we work together. Right? Doing this collectively is difficult. Doing this individually is impossible. So how do we get in conversations around these 150 choices to start to address some of the biggest challenges that we face as a society?
And I think, you know, it's interesting too, some things that I think Max and I got too is that I don't think we should see sustainability as like a competitive thing, right? That's what we're saying. Like the more that we all work on it together, that's how we're going to get there, not competing and trying to save your information.
I agree, because as a manufacturer, I have to fill out about 50 different surveys from 50 different A&D firms all over the country.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if we were all on the same page? Like, who'd have thought that a manufacturer, architects, construction, design professionals would have the ability to make choices every single day around human health and well-being, climate change, diversity, equity, and inclusion, waste? We've got 150 a project, 350 a project. How do we start to help hold each other accountable? So I understand how hard it is, but maybe it's hard because we're having the wrong conversation and we're chasing acronyms. Right? We can say, hey, I think we're at a point where, as an industry, I think that we understand why this is important, but the how's really hard. Right? We can chase EPDs and we can chase our cradle to cradle. You can go online and find out that we have HPDs. But then if you're lucky, you know how to read an EPD, and you can go to the 13th page and see that this product has a global warming potential of 4.73 kilograms of greenhouse gas per square meter. So I started to think after this conversation with HOK, we want to get into this work, but how do we make it easy? So we came up with this HOK report card. And now every time there's a sample order, not a project order, we're going to say, hey, Kay, your project, your sample is going to be there tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and you're going to say, here is the report card. The choice that you are making or looking at, here's the EPD. It has a global warming potential of this many kilograms of greenhouse gas per square meter. We understand that material chemistry is important to you. Here's all the work that this product has done around material health. Here's its recycled content. Here's its indoor air quality. Is this a cheat sheet? Probably. But you know what this is? This is an opportunity to get into conversations with design professionals early in projects and talk about the human values of our choices.
Clearly, we lit a fire with Tim in our initial conversation, because he's like, this is great, you're making my job easier. And so he actually, this kind of feedback from a manufacturer was huge for us getting designers on board, right? Because what we're doing is to ask them to do additional research. So we're asking them to do something new, something they haven't done before, that they may not have additional fee to do. So we're sort of saying you have to fold this into your workflow. And so when a manufacturer can short circuit that research by saying, I know what you're going to ask me for, because we've already had the conversation, and here's the information by sample. And so now our designers can make more informed decisions. I mean, I have this dream of our designers preference selecting for embodied carbon. You know, that's where we want to get, but we have to just get that information.
Eventually.
Yeah, information first.
Yeah.
We have to
kind of get to the baseline of
Yeah.
everyone understanding how to read these things.
But yeah, so this is sort of the nitty-gritty, getting into it, but we're trying to blend this new initiative into our designers' workflow. So what we did is we took the existing finish schedule and said, you know, you have all these different categories in your typical finish schedule, we're just going to add a couple more, and those are going to be sustainability related. And so we have the embodied carbon, the 2 green chemistry, and the 2 sustainable sourcing. And then we have also our targets, because we felt that if we just said, go do it, without a sort of target in mind or a goal in mind, it would be harder to motivate folks to do that. And then we have automatic performance. There's a calculator that shows you how you're doing in real time. And so, you know, it's not a new website or anything fancy like that. It's an Excel file, and we're working it into a Smartsheet. But it's blending into the existing workflow was really important for us to kind of get uptake.
Yeah, and I think we kind of missed, but we actually gave a series of 2 workshops. So this is, if you have a really large firm, you have to think about how you get everybody on board and kind of bought into this. So we actually had workshops where we went through actual product on that list and showed exactly where you find it on a website and where you look up the global warming impact and everything. So, and we did it office by office. We didn't do one big firm-wide thing because we wanted everyone to feel more accountable and to feel like it was a smaller group and they could really ask a question and not be intimidated.
Yeah, and that research informed our manufacturers' conversations, because we would have conversations with manufacturers and say, oh, well, when we were trying to demo your website with our team, they couldn't find it, or it was hard to find. So it was a good feedback loop.
Yep.
And so, we were rolling this out through 21. In the fourth quarter of 2021, we started to get some data through. So, we just wanted to get as whatever we could. And this, in the interest of being transparent, this is how we did.
Yep.
It wasn't a full year, and it wasn't every project, but it was that first sort of beta quarter for us. And we also have said that we're not going to just drop this initiative on each studio and then walk away. It's going to be a feedback loop, and so we're going to change our targets based on how we're performing. And so there's a flexibility baked into that. And so you can see with our performance, with the Embodied Carbon, our EPDs were over the target, so we're going to adjust that upward. The material certifications were also up. Surprisingly, the low-emitting certifications, the VOC stuff was lower than expected, so we'll adjust that down slightly. Recycled content was up, and FSC was about 100%. It was 96, so we're going to leave that alone. And so we're just trying to convey that, it's not all stick. We're trying to say that we're flexible and we'll adjust as, because we got some feedback early that in some markets, FSC certified wood is harder to come by than it is in, say, the Pacific Northwest or the East Coast. And so, we had to be flexible given that we're an international firm.
So now we're going to talk about circularity and kind of a new phase.
Yeah, so this is a little background. We inherited this blue planet that has, over billions of years, has created all these resources for us. And in the way that we've been thinking about, manufacturing and creating products and creating, cities and everything, we've just taken advantage of those billions of years of growth and basically just had a resource extraction, manufacturing, consumption, and landfill model. And clearly that's catching up with us. You'll see in a later slide how that is. And so I guess in the 60s or 70s, we started to realize that, and we pivoted to recycling. Recycling was the rage. And we now need to shift into a fully circular economy. And so that's where we're headed. That's where we need to head. Because the drawdown on resources, natural resources, it's a lot like the curve that you see for CO2. It's that hockey stick that's starting to get a little bit scary. And the other component of that is not just what we're pulling out of the ground, but what we're doing with it. And I'll always remember this. This was like a high school teacher, a science teacher said, there's two things you could see from space: the pyramids at Giza and the Staten Island landfill in New York City. And it blew my mind. And I grew up in California. I didn't even know where Staten Island was. And I was like, that's crazy. You could see a landfill from space? That's like a problem. So waste is overwhelming the environment. This is a concept called Earth Overshoot Day. And so what it means is throughout the year, the point on the calendar that we exceed the biocapacity of the Earth that has grown through the year. So it's like if you were to have a big pot of money and you invested that money, you want to be living on the interest, right? You don't want to be pulling down on the principal. And so what we're doing over the more and more recently, and this is that hockey stick I'm talking about, we're pulling down on the principal. We're exceeding the Earth's biocapacity in August. So at our current rate, it would take 1.6 Earths to meet our demand for resources. And that's not getting lower, that's getting worse, right? So this is, again, not to doom and gloom this thing, but we need to be shifting quickly into the circular economy model.
So we've been fortunate to work with Bill McDonough for the past 20 years. I spoke with Bill last week. and he was getting back from doing a circular economy thing in Davos, and he goes, we got to stop saying the world's resources. The word re makes it sound like they are replenishable. They are sources, not resources. So, Bill says human beings don't have a pollution problem, we have a design problem. So what have we designed ourselves into? Like, we've designed ourselves into a lineal economy. Right? The industry that we're so proud to be a part of every single day is responsible for 160 million tons of landfill consumption. And the only thing maybe that we've done circular is repeat that behavior. So what does a project look like? We get really excited. We get to work with HOK on a new project, and we deliver the samples and we do the project. What happens then? We pull sources, natural resources, out of the planet. We refine them to make it into a product. Beautiful, performing, everything we talked about in product standards. It gets installed, and when the lease is over, we get to do it over and over and over again. So I want to ask the question, what is the weight of what we do together? Right? So what's the biggest carbon intensity of a carpet tile, of a ceiling tile? Pretty much anything you don't plug in. We're talking about embodied carbon, right? And in an industry say, hey, Shaw, we want to see the lowest embodied carbon values. Where does the carbon come from? The carbon really intensity comes from everything that happens before it hits our front door. What is that stage? That's pulling petrochemicals out of planet. Then we refine it again. We refine it to get it to some manufacturable pellet or fiber to turn it into a product that we go to work with, right? For us to reduce our embodied carbon footprint, we have to reduce that stage of manufacturing, right? So how do we do that? Through circular economy, our return program. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I was asked by our leadership to forget everything I thought I knew about a circular economy and find a way to develop a program that fits within the systems of how we work. And over the past 15 years, I've tried to do everything I could to educate around circular economy. What I realized is we needed to educate our supply chain, a project supply chain, and I realized that we were always trying to do the right thing at the wrong time. When it came to recycling, it seemed like we were trying to do the right thing, worst possible time, because we only thought about recycling when it was time to throw something away. So I came up with this return program and said, how do we be proactive and educate our supply chain? And this is kind of this new phase of design of engaging our customers to participate in a circular economy with us. So our return program is an invitation for our customers to jump in with us in circular economy. We broke it down into these 5 easy steps. Identify, specify, introduce, execute, and report. First stage. I promise you, for those in the audience and those that are watching virtually, you're going to get a strange question every time you order a sample from a Shaw contract rep. We're going to talk about design, cost, performance. They're going to ask you a question, is there any way that you could help me find out what's currently on the floor? I'd like to see if there's an opportunity to reduce your project's landfill consumption, carbon footprint, so that we can participate in a circular economy. Can you get me a smartphone photo of the product? Can you pull up a carpet tile and let me see what the backing is? Can I get access to the space? Is there a facility manager I can talk to? Just that one little step. One more question. Can you engage with us in there? And then when we do this, the most important step in our success over the past couple of years has been to specify. So as I was doing the research, talking to the GCs and contractors, they agreed that why we needed to do this work, they just didn't know how. And if they don't know how, they don't know how to bid it. So guess what happens? They VE it out because we've written in recycle, carpet, tile, and that's the end of the specification. So we developed a specification. It's overwritten intentionally so that the GCs, demo contractors and flooring contractors know how to do the work and how to bid the work. Those 2 steps have changed the trajectory of our program. We've been trying to do this for 20 years. Then the third ask of you is, can you introduce us to your GC? We talk to flooring contractors, we talk to design professionals, but we don't talk to the GCs. But once the GCs have been introduced to Shaw Contract and they talk to our team, they're like, yeah, we could do that. Sure, I can put it on pallets. You're going to pick it up at no charge? Absolutely. Perfect. So just those 3 steps have changed our trajectory. And then another thing that we brought in is a program called Return Pipeline. And I think it's our way of proactively following through on every promise made to follow up on every project installed. And what we're doing is leveraging the data that we have to find out where our EcoWorks is installed all over the country, all over the world. So when our sales force get up in the morning, they turn on their computer, go into their CRM, salesforce.com, we now have a tab that says Return Pipeline. They can click on this and they can start to revisit projects that are 8 years old and greater to proactively follow through on those projects. So this happened by accident, but when it did, it was an aha moment for me. This is a screenshot from my Return Pipeline, and one of the projects on there at the top is the Verizon Hilliard, Ohio project that was specified out of an HOK office about 9 years ago. We recycled that material. Like, I hope 10 years ago, 8 years ago, that our Shaw Contract rep talked to the HOK design professional and said, hey, at the end of this product's time of service, we're going to pick this up at no charge and recycle it. Like, simply knowing where the material is gets us so far ahead of that place called away. We get ahead of the demo process. And when we get ahead of the demo process, we get more collaboration. And then Kay, you talked about the results. This is what the end of a project looks like. By recycling 5,200 square yards, we've eliminated 29,000 pounds of landfill consumption. By recycling that into carpet, we've eliminated our carbon footprint by 8,700 pounds of carbon. That's the equivalent of planting this many trees, not driving a car this many miles. What's the weight of our last project? And what would this look like from a designer to give something like this to your client? And then when you order a sample, we call this the Today Tomorrow opportunity. This is an HOK project in Houston. By specifying 5,000 yards of carbon neutral carpet today with this much recycled content, in the future, this is what our opportunity looks like in a circular economy.
I was just going to say, I think that this was really interesting for Max and I, because we hadn't heard this from any of the other manufacturers that we were working with. So, we always put into our spec, which I'm sure like all designers do, that the carpet has to be recycled, but
where's the follow through?
Put it in there. We never check
on it.
We don't check on it.
We
We don't know what happens to it. We don't know if the GC actually does it or what happens. And so we thought this was really great that Shaw is actually tracking it and making those phone calls and finding out when that space is up for lease.
Yeah, and I'd apologize to the design professionals. I think you have been over-promised and under-delivered when it comes to circularity. You've heard words like, don't worry, this is recyclable. We've got a take-back program. If it was, why isn't it happening? And then the other question I always got was, how am I supposed to know what happens to my material, my 150 choices, in 10 years? Like, our return pipeline is that opportunity to say, we're going to do our best to find out.
Yeah, whenever I saw the word recyclable in a cut sheet, it was like a red flag for me. I'm like, no, thank you. That's just a promise that'll be undelivered.
Yeah. So I think we just went through this one, but just, have you ever actually confirmed with your contractor that the carpet was actually recycled?
So owned space is easier than leased space, right? Because owner, you own that, and we're going to get those pounds out. Lease space is difficult. I've got 2 markets, and one is we're in the early conversations where we want to enter the leased space of that product that's going in there and set those alarms both for the design firm and for our team. So that's something that we're looking into and would be, the next phase of the return pipeline is asking for that lease information. And you know where that's happening? In Indianapolis, Indiana. That doesn't have curbside recycling in the city of Indianapolis. And they'll recycle more carpet than any city in the United States. Because there's one designer named Pam Francis that owns Shot Design that said, no, I'm going to stand up for this, and I'm going to change this. So if it can happen in Indianapolis, that's a city not called San Francisco, D.C. It's a designer that raised her hand and said, and they're the largest TI design firm in Indianapolis.
You know, it is a collaboration because, you know, if we have those clients and we have those connections and we hear that they're replacing carpet or whatever, we can like let you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I think it happens in lots of different ways. So we just thought we'd talk a little more about circular interior design, not just circular product, but, you know, what is circular interior design? I think as design professionals, this is all something that we're all going to start doing on all projects in a very short amount of time. It's happening very rapidly. I know when we started this initiative, we wanted to talk about circularity also, and we're like, no, let's leave that box off because like we're not there yet.
We didn't want to overwhelm our
now we're like,
folks.
oh, let's put the box back on a year later because it's time. But you know, it's really about considering using less materials on your project is the easiest way to do it. Like maybe there's just concrete floor and there is no extra flooring on top of it. Or you're using materials with very high post-consumer recycled content, and also using reused, refurbished material, whether that's furniture or some other kind of wall panel or stone. Those are the things that we need to start digging into, and it seems really overwhelming. I know for me as an interior designer it does, because it's just not what we're used to. But I think if the fashion industry can do it with vintage clothing, I think that, you know, we can start to do it in our own way in interior design. So we can go to the next one. This is just a great resource, this website. It's kind of a startup, but it covers beauty, fashion, and interior products. And if you go to the next slide, these were just two companies that we found on that website that are doing some really interesting things. So Heirloom Design is actually QR coding their furniture so that you can keep a history of the ownership of that piece and kind of the story with that piece of furniture. So if you think about like a vintage piece of clothing that feels really special because you know this person owned it or it's from this certain era, it makes it feel extra unique, and that's what they're doing with their furniture. And then Artec here, who makes very long-lasting furniture, they're actually reaching out to people that are selling their furniture. It might be a homeowner or something like that, and they're taking it back, refurbishing it, and reselling it at a discounted price. So I think those are all things, rather than just making new furniture, they're recapturing the old and making it feel new again. And I think there's one other, this was actually a really interesting one that I found too, Koyaguchi, where you can sell your used sheets, linen sheets, which last a very long time, to them. You get a discount on new ones, and they'll refurbish them and sell them at half the price also. So I think this is where, as interior designers, I think our minds are clicking, and there's this big opportunity in our industry to do something more. So has anyone here ever specified reclaimed or reused product on your projects? I haven't either, so I think this is something new for all of us. I know I tried once in the past and someone was like, oh, don't do that. It might fall apart, it might not have the warranty. So I think that's something that we have to kind of get over.
There's a
and come
lot
up
of
with new
companies,
ways.
Jane, there's Doors Unhinged, an organization in Pittsburgh. Pam Schott opened up the Schott Exchange. I know Eden Berkman in City of San Francisco is opening up a lot of reuse centers. So it may not be happening today, but keep your eyes out because these opportunities are starting to present themselves.
And they're very regional or very local. There isn't a national network. But there was a webinar that I was on earlier where I forget the name of the company, but they were trying to start that national network, that map of opportunities.
Yeah, because I think just like carpet, you can do the same thing with furniture. Like, when is that lease up and what's happening to that furniture, and know that it's available for your project. Yeah.
It's about the choices. We talk about circular of what happens when we pull things out, but it's also circular about the choices of our raw material. So this product, Bottle Floor, which it won Best of Sustainability at NeoCon the year that no one went last year. So it's back up in our floor. But it solves a big problem. Right, it's 99% polyester, and in each plank there's 61 bottles. So if you do your right thing and you take something to the curb, or if you put it in the blue container, it could end up as a source of raw material in our products. We think about bottles, but it solves a bigger problem, right? The only thing that companies like Lululemon or Nike or Adidas or Shaw want are clear bottles, because clear can come back to service as any color as it wants. But what happens to Sprite, 7-Up, or that bluish hue they added to Dasani to make it taste so good? It clogs up our recycling, the reverse distribution. Easy to collect garbage, hard to sell it. So this product has the ability to use mixed bales because all that polyester is underneath the face. It doesn't care what color it is. So it's purchasing a great source of raw material. And if you look at the next slide, what would it look like if it said that you have 359 bottles performing in the product that I specified in your building today? Does that add a different dimension of design? And at this product's end of its time in service, we have the ability to get that back to Shaw, take it apart, and recycle it back into the same product over and over again as well.
This was the one example that I could find. It's actually from our hospitality group. And, you know, they did this really more for budget reasons, but it is a circular approach to an interior. So you can see on the left there is the original lobby, and it's kind of got some crazy stone in it, right? And I think as a designer, most would be like, let's take it all out, we're gonna like redo this whole thing, right? But what they did was they decided we need to try to keep all the stone, and let's use other details. Like they added this dark band around the top, they updated the lighting, they changed the furniture, but rather than, you know, just ripping up and trashing all that stone, they kept it, and I think it looks really great. And so those might be the kind of approaches that you start to take on your project, rather than just thinking about ripping something out because it's pink stone or something that's not in right now. It actually, there's a way that you can design it to make it look really cool.
And so with a new way of thinking, we're going to need a new design phase. And that's what we're talking about here. And so as Tim said, you know, we need to push this design thinking early into the, even maybe before a marketing proposal goes out. Maybe you're doing due diligence with a client and checking out multiple spaces, and you could say, oh, that one had a great circular design potential, you know, and just adding that layer into the conversation with your client. And so if you go to the next one, we've just started this. This is like, you know, hot off the press, barely used. But this is just some thought starters, really, for you folks. You know, number one, we need to identify the assets. We need to get to that site before they start demo, so we can walk the site with the client or the VP of sustainability, who's an internal advocate, right? Find those internal advocates that'll help you, you know, identify what can be relocated, reused, refurbished. Be sure to take your measurements. And then also evaluate the opportunities and constraints of reuse. Just start to think about some of the practical things that trip us up. You know, oh, it's going to cost too much, it's going to mess with the schedule. So if you can get ahead of those in this early phase, then you have a higher chance of success.
And then this was one other thing we did at HOK to kind of like start to get everyone thinking in this way, but we did a little like internal design competition across the firm. And so we kept it very loose, nothing too, you know, too difficult for anyone. But the idea was that you just kind of got a small group in your studio, do like a 2-hour charrette. It could be really loose, nothing polished, and let's just share it with each other. So if you go to the next one, these were a couple of the ideas. So the one was this idea that we've kind of been talking about is how do you find all these materials? If you do want to use a reused material, or furniture or another product, where do you find them? And so what if there was something in the library that actually cataloged all these and it was digital and it had all those resources, and ideally it would be an exchange. You can go to the next slide. It would be an exchange where you might be talking to other firms. They might be letting you know that, hey, this project's gonna, you know, be demoed soon and there's a bunch of workstations in there, or there's a bunch of wood paneling, like walnut, does anyone need it, you know? So I think that's something that our industry probably needs to work towards, because that's not easy for us to do right now. So that's a big area that we need to kind of innovate in. And then the second one was example of a diner that our Dallas office did. So they kind of found this iconic gas station, actually, and they turned it into a diner. You go to the next page. They had some great inspiration. It's kind of like right off the highway, no green space. And so they came up with some, let's make it into a diner and kind of revive it. Let's add some green space. If you go to the next slide, you can kind of see some of their ideas here. So this was just a way to get designers to start thinking in a new way rather than just demo and build new. And so that's really just another point about that.
And this is it. This is your future, right?
Yeah.
And it's only going to get more intense. So this is what we're talking about internally at HOK. Our future viability is going to track to how we perform on sustainability, and not just say we're doing it, not just the product is recyclable, but track it, talk about it, and do it again, and get better. And so we can really, like you said, it's a design problem. Waste is a design problem. So we need to think about how we can design ourselves. We designed ourselves into it, we can design ourselves out of it with the creativity that I love tapping into at HOK. It's fantastic.
And what I think is the coolest thing about the work that we're doing with HOK right now might not be about the next project or how successful that is, but we're creating multipliers. Because I can tell you that the Shaw contract team wants to get into these conversations with you, with you, our customers, but it's different. Right? It's like, how often do we get stuck in the situation like, I really want to do this work, I understand why it's important, but my client didn't ask for it. I can tell you that the future's here. I mean, with ESG reporting, more and more of our customers that we share are now starting to measure their built environment through this lens called ESG. And the whole thing with like customers, they don't ask for it. And sometimes my reps say, well, HOK didn't mention it. When was the last time? Let's say that you just won a design award at Neocon here, and you came up to the podium and said, well, first of all, I would just like to thank my customer, and I did exactly what they told me to do. Right? We're innovative, we're creative, but we have to start to change the way we communicate. And I can tell you that my reps that are calling on HOK are going to feel more confident the next time they call on another design firm. And these multipliers are what are going to get this to scale.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for showing up.
Enjoy your new conference. Thank you.